really strange when the video starts with my face in the center of the video. What we're doing is making sure you're in the right place and that this is kind of a right fit, and then I'm going to explain the summer assignments, and I'll also explain why I'm filming me, not you, in the middle of all of that. So because this is an unusual course, we kind of do some unusual steps to, again, make sure that the fit is pretty good. So some of you have taken an AP US History or an AP Bio, and you may be familiar. Others of you, this may be a first kind of run in an advanced placement course. What you need to think about it as is a college-level course taught in a high school classroom. That's going to be the depth and the kind of the rigor of the content. The unfortunate thing is, if it were actually a college-level course taught in a college, you'd have it stretched out quite nicely. You know, what you're going to find is when you get to college, man, it's a lot easier than what your senior year is going to look like. Because here you're meeting with me every day. And every day there's a little bit of work to be done, as opposed to it being stretched out as one of 4 courses that you meet for once every 3 to 4 days. All right. So think of it as kind of a college-level class, but compressed into a high school setting. The major purpose of this course is to demonstrate that you got that college-level material on an advanced placement test, a standardized test made up not by me but by the College Board. And what I kind of detailed here is a little bit of the structure so that you know what you're walking into. It's a test that's broken up into 2 components. There's a multiple choice portion of it that's comprised of 60 questions, and you have 45 minutes to answer those questions. This is a test, by the way, administered in May. We have plenty of time to prepare for it, but it's a high stakes test. So you have those 60 questions, 45 minutes apiece. It means you have to answer a question, in a short kind of time fashion. We'll work on that time fashion. Speaking of short time fashion as well, you have 4 essay questions, and they are questions that have a scaffolding to them. There's usually kind of a central theme, but there's an A, B, C, D, and E potentially. So there's 4 kind of complex multi-part questions that you have to answer in 100 minutes. It gives you 25 minutes per question if you were not robbing from Peter to pay Paul. In other words, you pace yourself through that 100 minutes. And if you steal from one essay, the assumption is you can kind of catch up as you go along. So what does it take to make sure that you're in the right place and you're the right kind of fit? Well, you need to understand that the test is kind of driving things. The way I would run the course, the way you'd want the course run would be completely different if it wasn't for this test. So for better or worse, the test is this kind of, taskmaster that's always kind of, in the back of our heads. It determines what I have to teach in terms of content. So this is, what the College Board gives me as an overview of the content. And it's as generic and as general as that. These topics, these percentages. So when we're talking about constitutional underpinnings, I have to rewind you a little bit. I, deliberately planted chips in your head back in the 9th grade. And those are going to come to, work in your favor, but I've got to kind of trigger them again. So we're going to run back through some foundational stuff in terms of both world history and certainly U.S. history. We need to kind of look in a rapid-fire way at the revolutionary and constitutional period. Because this is essential fundamental background knowledge, as is understanding of the Articles of Confederation, the Constitutional Convention, the actual Constitution itself. So there's a lot of background stuff we have to do. But again, they're not very specific, and all they do is give me a percentage. Where the bulk of the course will focus on is the 3 branches of government. And again, I'll talk about how intensively we look at the 3 branches, as well as institutions that help them do their job, the bureaucracy. We're going to study bureaucracy. Places where specialized workers do specialized tasks. We'll look at the Department of Commerce, and you'll have to know kind of what they are and get excited about it on some level. Political beliefs and behaviors. What we're looking at there is how people not only formulate political beliefs, where do political beliefs kind of come from, what's the spectrum of political beliefs, but also what governs political behavior, what makes voting more or less likely, what makes people vote in certain ways, what are the trends and the patterns, okay? We're also going to look at what are considered linkage institutions. Linkage institutions are structures or institutions that are kind of considered outside of government, but they connect you to government. So we'd be looking at, for example, political parties, interest groups, the media itself. Public policy, that's code for major legislative kind of landmarks. Anything from the Social Security Act to all the way up to Obamacare. We'd be looking at major kind of legislative steps and accomplishments, which is somewhat separate from governmental actions that are there to guarantee civil rights and civil liberties. And we'll begin to kind of distinguish them. These are kind of considered more universal rights where you need less government to enjoy them, like freedom of speech, less government, more speech. These are considered acts that government has to take a proactive step to make sure that certain groups that often face discrimination get to have those rights, right? That's the kind of the content we're going to look at. And if you notice, it's kind of nuts and bolts. It's, the first thing I have to disabuse people of, it's not a current events course. It's not modern issues, contemporary affairs. We might use stories in the news to help illustrate things, but that's not going to be my central platform. I'm not going to start off by saying, hey, let's talk about the Malaysian jet one more time, and where is it? Just try to fill time with current events. This is more about giving you a structural kind of foundation, knowing how government works, almost like, I want you to think of this almost like an engineering course. We're going to first look at just the mechanics of government, and then we're going to look at how those mechanics kind of actually operate, how they go together to make the machine kind of run. It's an engineering course. It's just, instead of looking at a machine, we're looking at government. So there's, first and foremost, there's kind of vocabulary, there's identification. What is, we might look at, for example, the appointment process, and what are all the factors that lead someone to be appointed to the Supreme Court. And it becomes this long kind of unpacking of all the factors. And then we'll look at, okay, what happens in reality? What are some of the actual lessons of how these mechanics work? So that requires some advanced analytical abilities on your part. You're going to be doing both, multiple choice questions, but essay questions that involve that analysis, that pairing of identify and analyze. So this is, again, current events will be part of what we use, but it won't be kind of impassioned discussions of what's in the news on a daily basis. Nor, unfortunately, is the essay this great opportunity for you to go on some sort of political rant and write a political manifesto. It's formulaic. You have to kind of, answer the question. What is the filibuster? Why is this power afforded to the Senate and not the House? What are some of the means to restrict the filibuster? It's kind of this formulaic writing that sometimes students aren't entirely prepared for, I suppose. Let me give you real quickly a sample. So these are just from the essay portion. They only release a real small handful of multiple choice questions, and I use those in the form of practice exams, which we'll talk about later. But the essays are all pretty much available to me. And so I didn't give you 4, I gave you 3 just so it could go on one page. But these 3 are kind of examples of those types of questions. And this would dictate not only what we cover, but how we cover it. And it dictates kind of how you write. So you need to come to me with certain abilities to write. I mean, what I normally get, it's one of the two evils. Either I get students that are looking at AP as a resume builder, to be honest with you. They are looking to get into competitive schools. They want as many APs as they can get, and they do want the 5. All right? They do want the perfect score on the exam. But they don't have the interest in the content level. And it makes it kind of miserable for them and me. The other end of the spectrum, sometimes I get people that are, understanding that we're in a participatory democracy, and it's kind of incumbent upon everyone to be informed about their government so that it works, so that it functions. If we're not educated, then we kind of suffer as a result. The problem sometimes with those students is they have all of the passion, but maybe not the skill sets. And it's a struggle for them. You need to have both. On some level you need to have both the higher level analytical ability and the interest in the topic. The reason is because the stakes are pretty high. I talk a lot about, I bring an intensity to this class that I need you to mirror and match. Why? Because there's a standardized test, and that standardized test is really important to both you and to me. So let's say you're kind of in the class and you're taking a half-baked approach, and I have you do paired work. Well, the person that you're with is suffering as a result, and as is their potential grade. That's not fair. At the beginning of every school opening, the AP scores go up on a big board like this, and I sit there with all of my colleagues, and Mr. Lucia kind of highlights the highlights and the lowlights. My professional reputation, I get called into the office sometimes to look at what's your bell-shaped curve for your grades, who got A's, B's, and C's, and what's your bell-shaped curve for the AP test, who got 5s, 4s, and 3s. I'm highly accountable for this, and I get kind of, both a public spotlight and a private scolding if I don't do well with the numbers. So you have to understand that kind of creates a neuroses in me. I need you guys to kind of do well because, in part, everyone else depends on you and I'm depending on you. So this is really a partnership. In other classes you can decide, what, I don't care as much about this assignment, I'm willing to take the lower grade. You don't have that as much of an option here. You don't get to opt out. So you really have to kind of understand then what you don't get to opt out of. And having taught all of you, again, the first thing I'm going to do is send you to Mr. DeFranco's psychology class to just do a little self-analysis, because you're in store for the Mr. Hastings show on steroids. It's long block, I can fill that. And let's stay through lunch. All right? You know what the Mr. Hastings show is like. I don't know why it keeps getting picked up in syndication. Someone ought to cancel that at some point. And I expect you to be kind of active and engaged. We have kind of good numbers if everyone stays in. That's 10. But there's no room to hide. So what it means is, you're actively taking notes while I'm lecturing. You are participating, answering questions. I do kind of run-throughs where I'm asking questions. That's helpful. The pace is breakneck at points. Again, what I pace my course to do is to get all of those topics fit, where the schedule keeps shrinking on me. We start after Labor Day. The test, one way or another, is in May. It doesn't care about snow days. It doesn't care if you go on a band trip to Disney. It doesn't care if I have all these interruptions. So I have to make everything fit, and we go really quickly. It means also I'm ignoring your other, I'll work with you guys. You'll see in a second my calendar. And I can move things in my calendar if you've got, like, let's say 3 AP tests on the same day. But I have to kind of, say to you guys, look, this is what we need to cover, this is the time frame we have, this is the pacing. What I really need students to kind of consider is, are you signed up for multiple APs? And is this one too many? Are you in doing sports, doing band, doing DECA, doing other things that may take you out of the classroom or cut down on your time? And in a year when you have college applications and you need to think seriously, can I handle all of this? This is new, because I'll be honest with you, a lot of groups would hear me at the beginning of the meeting, and then they would begin to kind of ignore my idea of, like, you need to be fully committed to this in here. I'm expecting attendance to be impeccable. Now, what I mean by that is, I won't say no absences, but every single effort you can have to minimize absences, and we'll talk about what happens if you are absent. I mean, I make every effort. I have a complex kind of family life. My wife now works full-time. I've got 2 kids at 2 different schools. There are days I have to fly out of here, but, and if any one of them gets sick, the wheels come off the machine. But I took my son here, sick as he was, and had him sit in the back row one day to lecture to everybody, because it was like I couldn't miss the lecture. And he critiqued my whole lecture on economic policy on the way home. He was, what are you talking about fiscal policy for? It's all about monetary policy, Dad. And he just raked me over the coals at 9 years of age. I brought him here, all right? So I expect if I'm dragging a sick kid into kind of school, and I literally had him like not touch anything, we wiped everything down with hand sanitizer after. If I'm doing that, you have to get here, all right? If you can't get here, it explains in part why I'm recording. And I'm doing it more as a trial basis right now. If anybody is ever absent, I used to say, well, you need to make some provisions to record it and come in and talk to me afterwards. And everyone went, yeah. And no one ever did it. So not only am I now recording lectures, and I'll do this as a kind of, if it's not too cumbersome, I'll do it every lecture. If it is cumbersome, I'll do it as people are absent. But my expectation is you'll watch it after school. And I have to figure out some way to document it. Maybe I'm really thinking about embedding little hidden words. Like, what were the 3 passwords? And making you write down those words to show me that you watched it. So I'm working on a YouTube channel that I'm really scared about. I have to, so Teddy, is he the best potential intern? I need an intern who's going to help me navigate this. So you guys have to help me think of who's available and who might run my webpage, because it shouldn't be me. But what I have already is, a little test video that Mr. DeFranco and I helped me, kind of put together this morning. I'm going to put this one up to see if it works with the longer one, with me drifting in and out of the frame. And this will be the way that I hold you accountable. If you are absent on a lecture day, oh my God, you can't be absent on a lecture day. I can mention 4 different tests where I knew I mentioned the thing on the test on a given day, one given day. It was like about the Solicitor General, considered the 10th Justice of the Supreme Court. They're the ones that make the argument for the government in front of the Supreme Court. It's a significant person, but out of everything that we cover in government, it makes up maybe a day's worth of kind of lecture and 10 minutes worth of kind of discussion. You were absent on that day, you missed it, you were not prepared for the question. And the question is, 1 of 4. So, at any rate, you can't miss the lectures. We'll figure out how to, prove that you did watch the lectures. Maybe I'll put on hats, and, what hat did I wear at 3 minutes and 22 seconds in? I don't know. But we're going to come up with something to make sure that you kind of watch. If you don't watch, if you can't demonstrate it, then there's going to be academic penalties. You're going to sign a contract in a minute that says you agree to this. Well, you can take it home. They never sign a contract on the spot.
How soon after will you take the video, will you put it up?
It depends on Teddy. Depends on Teddy. Ask Teddy. I really got to rope him into this. As quick as I can, because ideally what I do is I hit from this, I send it to the cloud, I send it right to YouTube. So it should be, I don't plan on editing it too much, unless I slip up and curse or something. I keep wanting to set it up like a Crash Course, with little talking bubbles. And anybody watch that?
Yeah.
I'm counting on Teddy for that as well. He's going to make it into a Crash Course video. It'll be much more engaging. At any rate, I'm on a tangent here. That's a big thing. So you have to kind of plan on being here as much as possible. And then the other major thing is just steel yourself. I'm going to give you guys the calendar from this year that will radically change, I hope, a little bit. But it gives you an overview of the amount and the kind of the timing that you have for an assignments. And what you'll see in the calendar is we're going to use the summer to do some work. We're going to use all the vacations to do some work. And they're in big bold. And again, you're going to sign a contract, so you can't say, well, I didn't know, or I can't. If you are signing onto this course, then you are making a solemn promise to me that you will make yourself available after school on the date that we all collectively agree on for a minimum of 2 practice tests. I really only had to do 2 with my students, and then I was able to use one of my class periods for the 3rd. And that would be my plan with you guys as well. Now, by practice exams, I mean everything, soup to nuts. We'll do the multiple choice and the 4 essays within that, what essentially works out to be 2.5 hours. And it takes me a little while to hand things out, and we're going to actually give you instant results. I have the Scantron machine sitting right on my desk. I feed the multiple choice in, and I give you your results before you leave. And we talk quickly about the essays, and I hand you rubrics, and you go home and you look at it. So you need to commit to me in the month of May, and sports is always a monkey wrench. Other things tend to be a kind of a problem, but we're going to set in stone somewhere a date that you will move heaven and earth for. And we will make sure that we all collectively take these 2 exams. You know, I usually obviously spread them out, but that's what you're going to sign the contract for. Now, other kind of quick things to mention: the quality of the assignments and the grading. It's going to be very familiar to you. It's the Mr. Hastings show. It's study guides that, again, are on steroids. They're incredibly comprehensive. There are activities that are not quite what you remember doing on kind of the Wall of Fame here, but we will have often some hands-on things. And I'm really trying to adjust the schedule this year with my summer assignments so that we can do more of that. So there's more time for the processing and less time of me up here kind of foaming at the mouth. So hopefully we'll restructure it, but you know, again, lectures, study guides, tests, lecture tests, independent tests, reading tests, essay tests. There's a whole slew of different formats I throw at you. Sometimes the test is exactly what you'd expect based on the study guide, but you can't anticipate that when you're taking a standardized test. Everyone does well on my lecture test because I've prepared you uniquely for a lecture test. What I include on them, and I'm going to do so more, is a series of random questions that I get from outside sources, just to see how you handle those outside questions. Because I have to be neurotic about what's covered, and I can't trust that I'll cover everything in a lecture, you do readings of chapters. And we go from not just reading tests that you remember in world history, where it's 5, 6, 7 questions based on a section, it's the entire chapter. And I have different ways of holding you accountable for that chapter, so you've got to read independently. And then what I do with the majority of the units is throw essay questions from past AP tests for you to first outline, and then select one for you to write under test taking conditions. So with all of that, I expect you guys to be kind of like on point. When you do a study guide, you're not just doing it to get it done. Everything you're doing is in preparation for the AP test, and you have to do it with a level of diligence that reflects that. Same thing with group work, same thing with tests. We go over our test. I expect you to take notes and figure out what you got wrong. Don't just look at the number and go, well, that's the number, and think you're done. You know, once you've gotten the test, you need to identify what I got wrong and really focus on what you got wrong so that it's no longer a weakness, okay? All of this hard work, all of this sacrifice is likely to come with the price tag of a lower grade, all right? Grades typically track up, but initially, because the content is unfamiliar, because the testing is got you out of your element, you know, people are working twice as hard for a grade that is not what they'd expect. The way you have to look at it is if you're in the A range, that is a 5. That is a perfect score in a test, and no one is usually there first quarter. People occasionally get there quicker than others, but you know, some people who are coming to AP for the first time and maybe a little over their head, they might be in the C range. Most of you might be in that B range, somewhere within a bell-shaped curve. And it's only second, third quarter that some people begin to click and fire on all cylinders and get to that A range. So part of the purpose of this meeting, this long diatribe, is to make sure you're okay with all of that. Never sign a contract immediately, think about it, but this details everything I just said, and your name on the dotted line is a blood oath. Meaning, when it comes to a missing lecture, you know you have to make it up or I will haunt you. And you know you'll face academic penalties. When it comes to a practice exam, you have to make it. All right? Now, and when it comes to a summer assignment, here's a nice transition, you got to be ready for it. This was what I gave, like, past groups. And I'm going to ask something unusual for you, so in exchange, I'm kind of splitting the pot. I'm first showing you the kind of ordeal the other groups had to go through. You remember power outline? How long did a power outline typically take you, right? And how many pages did you generate? If it was 5 pages, you tend to generate a 4 to 5 page outline, right? This would be no different. In the past, I gave students 3 separate chapters that are 30 to 40 pages in length, and they outlined them. And there were specific kind of due dates for them. And then on the first day of school, I tested them on this knowledge. It allowed me to cover some things that I don't go entirely in depth with, but I don't know if it was as effective as it should be. In that people outlined, and then with the gap in time between when they outlined and the test, they forgot things. What they outlined isn't always what was critical. And there may have been, shortcuts that students took to not, to kind of get around things. So at any rate, I'm really going to scratch a lot of this. What it resulted in is I exported a lot of things to the summer, but I had to do all my foundational things up front. So if you flip, this is another way to gauge, what you're in store for. And it got a little more precise as I went along. This was the calendar that I kept for students in the past, on Edline. So here's my Edline page. I don't know how much longer it'll be up and operational. You go to the calendar. And initially I just documented assignments. And then what I started doing is my lesson plans right on it. So as you go, it will seem more dense. But what you're going to see is, for example, what we were doing on a daily basis, which is, here we're after the test, not a lot. Okay? But you'll see that, we got really busy as you flip through the calendar towards the end. Towards the end, when you are most fatigued and starting to, be unable to combat senioritis as well as you should, I'm going 1,000 miles a minute and I'm covering a new unit every 2 weeks. No good. So what I want to do is scratch this assignment and export all my foundational stuff. And again, it explains why the camera is here. What I want to do is, I think, pretty logical. So if you flip to the, I gave everyone one of these, but if you don't have it, I have some extra. This is kind of our talking points today, but it also has our summer assignment on the second page. All right. What I want to do, I think, makes sense, and it picks up where you've kind of left off. One of the things that you last covered in history was the whole civil rights movement. So let's jump on that, and let's solidify it, and let's make sure that you can take what you studied in history and apply it in the governmental context. So part of your assignment is to read, and outlining is optional, whatever gets you most prepared, but you're going to read through the chapter in the Approaching Democracy textbook, the red textbook, chapter 14, on civil rights and political equality. And then I'm going to test you on that. Now, what I want to do is I want to take my testing, and instead of doing it within the first days of school after that information has left your head, I want to do it during the summer. And again, I'll tell you what my trade-offs are going to be. So the reason I circulated emails was I kind of picked a date somewhat arbitrarily, but somewhat kind of spaced out. So you get out next Wednesday, you have a week and change to kind of prepare, and then on the 10th, I could do it anywhere really in here. But I picked a date, and that's the day I want to test. I want to see if I can get the majority of you available for that date, and we're going to figure it out via email. If you're not, I might be able to make some accommodations for students that, like let's say there's 2 students, they're away on a vacation, fine, I'll come in on a different day for you too. But if people are just, I don't know, going abroad for the entire summer, what I'm going to have to do is then test that person the day they get, the week we get back into school. So you'd have to take the test like everyone else, but you'd have to do it, maybe after the information isn't as fresh, okay? So I'm not negating any kind of summer vacations. I'm just trying to create some incentives to let's take it when it's fresh, let's get it off the calendar so that we can go faster, okay? So that's the first thing we need to think about. We need to think about, are the majority of you available at some point during this week, and what's the best time of the day to take that test, all right? 2, once we've kind of, covered what is most familiar to you, I'm going to backtrack and I'm going to go over kind of foundational things. Everything that you've kind of learned about world history and government in general, the foundational things that you ought to have in a lecture series. Now normally, when you look at that calendar, that takes me a couple of weeks to unravel. But if I do it in slightly longer chunks, I can get it done in a week. Again, what I'm looking for is not an empty room to talk to. If I have to come in and talk to an empty room, I will. I'll talk right to the screen, and then I'll put it up on YouTube. and you'll have to watch it in your convenience. What I really would prefer, though, is at least 4 of you staring back at me vacantly. You know, ideally I want all of you. So this is a week that I picked somewhat arbitrarily, but I want, you know, bodies in the room because I think it's always better than looking at it electronically. Again, if you're off in Europe backpacking and you're not available, it's going to be there electronically. What I want to do is test on that. There's a study guide. This is now your summer assignment, to watch the lecture series and complete the study guide. And that way I know you've got more kind of pinpoint information, and then I will test you on it. Again, I want to do it when it's fresh in your head. So again, I somewhat arbitrarily picked a date, and I'm hoping the majority of you are available. If you're not, I'll try to make some sort of accommodation. You know, I'll give an alternate date and see if I can catch the rest of you for that. If not, that's a second thing that we have to make up when we come back for school within the first couple of weeks. All right? Number 3. Oops. This one. Would be the week before we get back to school. And again, I somewhat arbitrarily picked this. There's room to move it in terms of a week. But to do the lecture series that I do on the revolutionary constitutional period, your kind of, you know, your U.S. foundational topics. And it would be the same deal. In this case, all I would have to do is a lecture series and then assign the study guide, and we would have a test, and we would put it within the first couple of days you come back. So because it's close to when we start, the 3rd, I don't necessarily have to have you come in on a separate day. Again, I'm looking for 4, 5, 6 of you, ideally all of you. If you're not able to come because of family vacations or other things, it's going to be up on YouTube. Okay? So what it saves you is 3 chapters that you read independently and have to outline. I'm doing most of the work. I'm doing the lecture. You'd have to do the study guide. Obviously, that kind of is in place for the outlining. You have to do the test, but you'd have to do those anyways. And what it allows, if you go back to my original calendar, if we can do it this way, I forget where I put my original calendar. There it is it saves us 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks, roughly. By stealing some time from you during the summer, you know, I'm still going to have to do some things where, like, you're doing a paired activity on the Declaration of Independence, and there's a couple of other things. But it saves me roughly 6 weeks, which means I can slow the heck down on some of these other units and actually get you guys to enjoy it. Maybe we can play Pictionary occasionally. I didn't do that with my No, You Can't Play, no fun, right? Maybe you can play Pictionary occasionally. So, having said that, I'm going to turn off the camera so you can now kind of, like, you know, grouse or tell me what works and what doesn't. But questions?